Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Manulife Business Success Series webinar on hiring great employees and leaders. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. Today's session would not be possible without our continued support from our sponsors and partners. And so a special thank you to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, and our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and to this month's presenting sponsor, Future Focus Incorporated. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. I'd like to now welcome Andrew Kugler. He's the Vice President, Small Business and Group Benefits with Manulife Canada, to say a few words. Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to open up this great session. I've been a leader at Manulife for almost 15 years, managed a variety of teams, and I think, having a session on hiring and retaining top talent is something that, you can always make time to attend. At Manulife, it's a very large company. We have a very kind of robust HR department, and I've actually kind of over the 15 years been through many regimes in terms of learning how to attract the right talent as well as retain that top talent. So, there's always something to learn. The one thing I might leave you with before we jump in is, recently at Manulife, the one thing we've been thinking more about that I actually think is a really good idea in terms of attracting top talent is, really making sure you set up the right diversified set of candidates. And that, ultimately sometimes when you are hiring for a position, you can have maybe some unconscious bias that, potentially doesn't get you the most diversified pool of talent that you might want to actually take a look at. So one of the things we've been working on is really making sure that when you have a role that you're hiring for, to consider things like a diversified pool of, whether it's gender, age, ethnicity, to make sure that when you actually make your decision on choosing that talent, you've seen the best, broadest available pool that's out there in the marketplace. So that's my little tip for the day, and I'm sure there'll be many more things discussed on the panel. And thanks for having me. Back to you, Ian.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and as always, we're thrilled to have Manulife on board with this series as we work to support local business during these difficult times. And Manulife is, as many others, but certainly a great partner of ours at the Chamber of Commerce, supporting us in so many of our activities and supporting small business here in the region of Waterloo. So thank you to them. Just before we get on with the guts of the session, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have any questions that come up throughout the session, you can type them into the question box in your control panel at any time. I'll look for those and try to incorporate that into the discussion that we have over the next hour or so. If you have tech-related problems, a representative of our team will get right back to you. Questions for today's presenters will be gathered throughout the sessions, as I've said, and we'll try and get those answered in real time. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation, and it will also be made available on the Greater KW Chamber website, and we'll be sharing it through our social media platforms as well. So if your a friend or colleague missed it, there'll be an opportunity to hear this session in another forum. I've already done that. I'd like to now invite a good friend of the Chamber, a good friend of mine, Michael Snyders. He's the President of Future Focus Incorporated, to introduce today's speakers.
Thank you very much, Ian. Future Focus is very proud to present this month's Business Success Series with a focus on talent and leadership. We provide leadership training and development for small and mid-sized organizations. Today we have today I have the privilege of introducing Olivia Tate and Christina McDougall from Artemis Canada. I've worked with Artemis Canada a lot, and they are one of the premier firms in our region around talent acquisition. Olivia is a connector of people and an executive recruiter at Artemis Canada. She is passionate about the difference a great leader can make and has a gift for getting to know the unique qualities of a person and matching them with challenges that will excite them. Goal-oriented and results-driven, Olivia works in partnership with her clients to ensure they find the right leader to help them succeed. Christina is the president and founder of Artemis Canada. Based in Waterloo, Ontario, Christina has spent more than 20 years as a partner to a variety of technology companies, helping them attract rare talent and build strong leadership teams. Please join me in welcoming Olivia and Christina.
Well, thanks, Michael. And I know towards the end of the month, we're going to have another session around a sort of retaining and building on and strengthening teams. So if some of those issues come up, maybe you can at the tail end maybe sort of connect what we're talking about today to our session towards the end of the month. But all very important as we all focus on having the right talent for these unique times and for what the future holds for all of our organizations moving forward. So thank you for that. I think Olivia and Christina, you have a short presentation, and then we'll get into a little bit of a fireside chat with some questions that I'll help lead through. So the floor is yours, and over to you.
Thank you. So yeah, we're keeping the presentation at the top short because there's a lot of people with a lot of great talent experience. I just wanted to start by laying out balancing hard and soft skills in recruitment and what that looks like. So Artemis was founded in 2013 by Christina, and we work with growing tech companies and helping them place leaders and pivotal people to their small teams at really important times. So we're a small business ourselves, and we work with startups and scale-ups and even corporate innovation because getting the right person at the right time is a really critical aspect for every organization. And there's a lot of excitement when startups are growing or when small companies are growing, but it's also sometimes tricky to figure out how to make the right hire. How do you make sure that you're getting someone who's going to be the talent you need, but also a great fit for your team? So I'm going to run through some of those concepts, and then we're going to talk more and get into some of your specific needs in the fireside chat. I'm really excited about that. To start off, the most important question to ask when you're looking for someone is, why this role? Why do you need to hire this person right now? Is it because you're replacing someone? Is it a new hire? Are you expanding part of your business? Or we have a candidate or a client who just started hiring salespeople because they've been growing, they've established their product, they've established some of their funding, and now it's time to get that product out in the market. It's really important to think through the strategy behind why is this hire important, because that's also partly what's going to get candidates excited. Candidates get excited about opportunity. And so it's also important to know what are the aligned expectations across the team of what this role is going to do for the company. In the case of that client I mentioned, bringing on a sales team now is because they're ready to start opening up new revenue options. They're ready to have someone bring in new contracts because they've established the team behind them that can execute on them. It's really important to be clear about what the opportunities are or the challenges are when bringing new people onto your team. That piece of your story is going to be what really helps you find someone who fits the role. But it's also really important to know what the objectives of the role are so you can help establish what skills they need to bring to make that happen. Establishing this candidate profile up front is really important to fairly compare candidates and also make sure that you're establishing fit and talent and looking at those soft and hard skills all the way through the process. So when I talk about hard skills, some of the things that I'm talking about are, what is the scope of the role? I mean, there's the obvious things, sales, marketing, communications, but is there a division between the responsibilities? Often in small companies, you have people who wear many hats. So knowing what you expect out of people is really important in terms of what skill sets you're looking for. We often see a lot of overlap in small companies, HR, operations, finance. And if someone has all of that, that's great, but it's important to know what that breakdown is going to look like. Also, the reporting relationship. Is this person going to report into someone else, and is anyone going to report into them? That piece is really critical. If you are adding someone to a team and there's going to be people underneath them, you need to make sure you're adding someone who's going to garner respect, whose experience is going to elevate your team and help them grow professionally too. So thinking about how much experience they need is going to be really critical. And really importantly, I know it's easy in tech because we think of, oh, tech stack, what technologies do you use? But in every company, there's going to be tools that you use that people need to be familiar with. If you're hiring an accountant, obviously they need to have Excel and Microsoft Sheets capabilities, but probably QuickBooks too. And maybe you're thinking about adding Salesforce to your team. So that could be an additional skill someone could bring in and help make that transition easier. So isolating what the responsibilities of the role are going to help you establish that list of hard skills. And it's great to have a list of need to have and nice to have on top of that as well. The soft skills, I think, are really where people start to get a little bit tripped up in what do they look for? How do you screen for fit? And the two main categories that we like to look for are attitude and motivations, because those are two things you really can't change about people. Attitude is things like, how do they show up in the meetings with you? Are they prepared? Are they engaged? How do they treat different people on your team who may or may not, they think, impact their hiring situation? There are indicators of success that you can look for as well. If you're doing reference checks, if you're looking at their LinkedIn, do people speak favorably about them at all levels? Do people still want to work with them? Are they still in touch with old colleagues? These are really good indicators of someone who brings a good attitude. If someone comes in with questions to an interview, are they curious? Did they do follow-up between a first and a second interview and look into more of the things that you talked about? Those are all attitude aspects that they're going to bring to whatever job they do. It doesn't matter what the role is. And it's important to know how their attitude is going to align with your company's values. We're going to talk more about that in a second. But motivations are something that I love talking to candidates about. And it's as simple as what gets you out of bed in the morning. What challenges have you solved before that you really want to solve again? What work are you the most proud of that you've done? Because as I mentioned, in small companies, a lot of people are going to have aspects of their job that maybe don't fit their sole purpose. Maybe that accountant also has to do something on the org side. They maybe have to do some operations stuff that's maybe not their favorite part. But if it's 5% of the job, that's not a big deal. Where this gets really critical is looking at leadership and skill set. So let's say a sales leader. If you are promoting someone who's a really, really great salesperson to a leadership position, is it because they want to be a leader? Or is it just because you think they're the best salesperson? They should be in charge. They're doing great things. People can impact the team in every position though. And so if this person doesn't really want to be a leader, maybe they can do it at the beginning if the team is small. But as the team scales, does their motivation scale with that role, or do they start to become bad at that role? Figuring out what they're excited about now and what they're good about now is really important for figuring out how they're going to add value to the company over time. I mentioned culture before. This is really important. And it's obviously something we all think about. So the first question is, does your company have established values? Not all small companies do. It's important to think that through as you start to grow your team, because if you feel like you've got something really great on your team and you don't want to lose it, you have to establish what that is. And also, how do those values show up? So Artemis, one of our values is authenticity. And one of the ways that Christina makes sure that shows up is that once a year, we do a skills honing session about how to have really challenging conversations, how to be authentic and professional, and making sure that the team is communicating in that way all the time to each other and to our clients and candidates. So that once a year tune-up is really important to keeping that value aligned with the whole team. It's also important to look at past successful hires and maybe not past successful hires. You know, where have things gone right and where have things gone wrong? And what were some of the indicators about those along the way? One of the things that we already mentioned in the intro is diversity. This is huge because it's really easy to like people who seem like you, especially in a growing company. It's easy to see people who sort of slide right in and kind of just amass with your team. They fit in right away. But it's important to wonder if you are familiar with a candidate profile, if you're hiring a marketer and you have another marketer, maybe they went to the same school, maybe they had the same career track. Does that person add double the value of the first person? Or is it just a profile you're familiar with? Thinking about new perspectives adding value is a really key point. I have a client that I work with, and they came to me because they realized they sell to a profession that's 90% women. They have an entirely male leadership team. And all of a sudden, one day they realized we are probably missing out on a whole bunch of opportunities in terms of what the product looks like and gets used, in what way it gets used, because we don't have any women offering their point of view on the team. And that's such an easy misstep if you just think about hiring people who match your energy. And it's also really important, as I mentioned, with leadership to make sure that diversity shows up all the way through the org chart. It's really important to have diverse points of view at every level so you can make sure you're continuing to have diverse points of view at every level. And we're really going to dive into this talent versus fit now and more in the fireside chat too. But some of the things to think about are you hiring for the job right now? Or are you hiring for the company and the team overall? Are you adding people who are aligned with your company's mission, who are going to start in a role that they can execute and grow and add more value to the team over time? Or are you hiring for a skill set that you really need because you're pretty stressed and you need to add someone in who's going to take that load off? Both are valuable, but it's important to know what that looks like. I also wanted to mention that each role has its own balance of talent and fit. If you think of an engineering role, there's a lot of talent requirements on that side. You can't escape that. You definitely need people who have the tech skills. But fit is still important in that role. And I think that sometimes gets lost when you look at some of the tech organizations that have succeeded and some have failed. Making sure that fit is evaluated for every role is important. Maybe on the other side, maybe you have a junior HR role where the list of what they need to have done isn't as big, but the fit is going to be crucial for the success of that person. So every role is going to have a different balance, but it's important to make sure you're weighing both of them at both times. We actually have a client who is really, really passionate about making sure that fit fits at every level. And they do a fireside chat as the last round of interviews for every senior level hire with the entire leadership team. And the focus is just on, do they add to the conversation? Do they add new things? Do they help us all learn? Do they help us grow as a company? And they have had great candidates get to the end of the line and not hire them because it's not the right fit for the company. And that's the point I wanted to end on. I really feel like small companies sometimes need to be empowered. It is okay not to hire someone who is seemingly qualified if they're not a fit for an organization. Because I think it's your organization. If you want to maintain what's special about it, you really need to make sure that you are keeping that fit in mind with every hire. So that's the end of our little intro session. I'm going to turn it back to everyone and we're going to have a little fireside chat. I'm really eager to hear what questions you guys have.
Well, thank you for that, and I think I just wanted to start with a couple of points that came from your presentation. We've started, and as you can imagine, diversity and inclusion has taken on an enhanced focus for many businesses, particularly small and medium size. And I was interested in the opening comments about unconscious bias and how to diversify the talent pool. I think Mr. Kugler talked about that. Just quickly, because I think that's an important starting point in terms of rounding out what our teams look like. What are, just off the top, a few, like how to do that? Like what are some of those tips to get started? Because it's a big conversation, but I'd be interested in how to access or how to diversify even the talent pool that you're looking for from initially, particularly recognizing most of the businesses that are watching and that will review this are going to be in that small and medium sized space.
Mm-hmm. I can maybe jump in there first. So I think the first is just intent. So, you know, if you make it a priority that we're going to evaluate a pool of candidates or a handful of candidates for this role, and we're really going to try hard to make sure that we're seeing representation across, you know, maybe where there's gaps in your organization or just sort of across the talent pool in general, because if the first thing that you do, and it's almost counterintuitive that your best candidates are going to come from referrals, but if you're always dipping into the friends and previous colleagues of your current employees, you're going to likely find people who are the same. Not always, but I think just make it an intent and then communicate that intent. So make sure that if you're looking for referrals, if you're talking to the community about the type of person that you're looking to hire, be explicit about the fact that you're really excited about seeing diverse candidates. We kind of are in a bit of an opposite situation. So we're an entirely female team, and so diversity for us is a little different. But you know, we need to be explicit So if we think, you know what, our next hire needs to look different than the rest of us and come from, you know, a different kind of background, then we need to explicitly go out looking for that, or the assumption might be find me another Olivia, which would also be great. So I think intent is the first thing, and then question some of your requirements, because some requirements are actually nice to haves and they shrink the pool. So if you are looking for someone who has, say, done this job in a similar organization for the last 5 years, and all of your peers in your industry have defaulted to hiring white men into those roles, then that's your whole pool. So you may need to look at where can you stretch? You know, where can we pull people from other industries where the skills are the same? So, you know, get creative and really challenge all of the things that you think are necessary that maybe aren't. You know, if I say I really want someone at a tech, I'm shrinking my ratio to the people that have been hired in tech before. If I say let's look another place.
Yeah, so the other part is looking at different networks, right? So expanding beyond your, like, you know who you know, is that part of it is getting outside of that of your own network and trying to expand that, where you're likely to see different faces, different people generally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing, and we see it in tech in Waterloo, because there's, you know, you can kind of joke about the fact that there's about 4 or 5 companies that almost everybody has in their resume, and I think as you get beyond that, you get not just diversity of you know, of demographics, but diversity of experience and ideas as well. So looking at, as you say, looking beyond the usual suspects, or the places where you're hanging out now. And there are sort of dedicated networks and pools. There's women in tech and women in a variety of industries, groups that you can go to and post to. And I think the flip side of that is make sure that you're presenting yourself authentically as a company that people want to work at. So, you know, if we presented ourselves as an organization where really only women are going to be happy working here, we don't, you know, if we're not fostering a sense of belonging for anybody who can come and do a great job, then we're going to limit our talent pool based on the people who want to work in our company and who opt in. So thinking about what are you putting out there and authentically, and then what is that process? What are people getting to see as they're getting to know your company, and do they feel as though that's a place where they'll belong? And, you know, belonging really is the key thing that people are looking for in a new role.
So one other thing I wanted to touch off the top, because there was lots of great information in your presentation to start. But your focus is on tech, and so I think many of the businesses in the chamber, we have tech companies, but many of them will be in everything from services to manufacturing, retail, take your pick. There's going to be a little bit of everything. The fact that you focus on tech, these principles that you're talking about would follow through no matter, you know, or in general for any business. These are the tips or the things that you should focus on in order to get the right person. So it's not, and the reason I say that is sometimes people say, well, it's tech and it doesn't apply to me. I think there's still that notion in the community that tech is something over there and the rest of us do business somehow differently. But I think I just want you to kind of comment on that these are principles that are important to any business, not just in the tech field that you focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so that what we might bucket as the hard skills or the technical skills are different industry to industry. So my husband is in construction and HVAC, and there's so much in common with how he builds his team. And it really is fit first, you know, what's the company we want to build, and then you layer on the technical skills that that person has to bring into the business. So whether it's, you know, retail or automotive, I mean, we're a services business, and our clients happen to be tech, but you know, the team that we build are really services first, and thinking through, you know, how am I building the company? Because I think we see it in all industries that hiring is often very reactionary, and that's, I think, where we make bad hires. because, to your earlier comments about, hire slowly and fail quick, that you really need to be thoughtful about the kind of company that you want to build. And even if you're not hiring today, to be thinking through what are the must-have things that we need in someone in our team. Like, what are the showstoppers? Like, if someone's a jerk, they don't belong, regardless of the technical skills. So that you're never kind of wooed into that sense of, yeah, but they can solve the problem, like they can put out the burning building. And it's the burning building that I'm thinking about.
Okay, so that leads to the classic business conundrum, particularly for a small and medium-sized firm. You need to fill a position because, the owner and the founder is also the HR director and the business development person and the take your pick. They're doing all the jobs. So they need to hire someone to get something done. So the conundrum of, I need someone, I need it now. There's an urgent requirement that demands very specific skills. I need to get that person hired. Do you make the exception and say, I got to get the person with the skills? And what about, culture and fit? I've always said it's more important to me at the chamber to have people that believe in the chamber and what we're doing for our members than it is necessarily to have someone who ticks those boxes for the specific things in social media or other things. Doesn't matter. But I mean, sometimes there's that technical, only an engineer can sign an engineer's document for your company if that's what you're hiring. So culture and fit, that's where struggles with, I actually got to do business. So what's how do you balance that? And what's the risk? Because you can hire someone who can do the skills, but if they're just going to screw up your team, that's not going to work either. So there's an easy question to get started for you.
Sure. So it's, so to speak to risk first, maybe people think, oh, okay, well, I've got 3 months of probationary period that I could, change my mind. Maybe there's a recruiting fee that's a cost, but the cost is much bigger than that, right? So you don't know the damage that they've done with customer relationships. If we've seen organizations where one person joins and a bunch of people leave because their new boss is someone they just can't imagine working for, or that the impact that person has essentially breaks what you've built. So you really need to be thoughtful. You could hire someone on contract, it's kind of my first thing. Like, if there's something's on fire and once it's not on fire anymore, you don't need that person, then hire a contract firefighter. If that's what it's going to take. You can't always plan for filling a vacancy. So ideally, months in advance when that requirement's going to come up. But where people only need to give 2 weeks notice, sometimes it happens quickly. So you really have to have a strategy in place that if any role is empty, what are we going to do quickly so that we can have some choice? And again, lead with, I'm looking for someone. If you're going to tell your whole network, you really have to put it up front, like, introduce me to people who have these characteristics. If I need a recruiter, I don't want recruiting experience. I want characteristics. I can teach someone how to recruit, but I need someone who, like, show me your people who are kind and curious and smart, and we'll maybe teach them the rest. So I think just being thoughtful about that, and really looking at what's the expense if you wait, because it's probably less than making that hire.
Okay, I don't know, Olivia or Christina, we think we've all faced this, where someone presents really well in an interview and you go, wow, I'm totally excited. And they may even have the resume and they may have references that you kind of, that might paper over, but the culture's just not there. So that it may be there in the interview, but when they show up, if that fit piece isn't there, how do you spot that, and how do you sort of treat it or deal with it at the outset? Because that can't go on for long. Otherwise, you've lost the opportunity to have your new person understand the culture that you expect. as they start. So give them the opportunity to live the culture and the authenticity of your business.
Mhm. Olivia, you want to take that one?
Okay. I mean, you'll probably need to jump in because you've hired more people to work under you than I have. But I think initially, a huge piece of that fit is really digging into it in the interview process. I know we're going to address, like, you know, once we've already got them on board, but digging into it in the interview process, references are great, but really taking time at each step and building in additional steps. Like I said, that fireside chat that one of our clients does, making sure that you're having a chance for them to speak to peers, to speak to people above them. If they're going to be managing a team, having that team as the last step to make sure the team kind of says, like, yeah, their vibe fits with our vibe. This is a good fit. We can see it. Because the team also will know more about your culture day to day and how that shows up. Whereas someone coming in may not know what to expect, but those meetings can be really crucial. I find that the right person usually comes out of meetings with the team more excited about the opportunity because they've had a chance to sample the culture. They've had a chance to see how they interact with each other. And that's really important.
So
Yeah.
So I was just going to follow up there. When you're starting and recognizing, you know, smaller businesses, when we're hiring, it's usually, you know, in theory, I'm the person they report to because we're a small business. In practice, everyone reports to someone else because I just get in the way. But so we have usually 2 or 3 people that are part of and we do group interviews right from the start because we're not big enough to not do it that way. Is that what you're describing? Is saying have a couple of people so that you may kind of go, yeah, it looks perfect to me. Someone else, the alarm bells are going off saying, you know, didn't like the answer there, or they really kind of sneered their nose at such and such. Is that how you kind of are looking at that whole equation of saying what feels good to me may not feel right to the rest of the team?
Yeah.
I think so. And I think it's also, if you've got a small team, that means you've selected each of those people for their opinion as well. So you need to trust your team when they put up red flags about people. When I interviewed with Artemis, the team was half the size that it is now. And I met with everyone individually as well as everyone as a group. And I got a chance to ask each individual what it was like being managed by Christina and get their opinion because everyone's a little bit different, but I could find a common thread between their answers. And that gave me a really good idea of what it would look like for me.
Yeah. And I think that, and it circles back a little bit to the diversity question. And it's just a flag that if you have your whole team and you ask them, like, what do you think about culture fit? Or what do you think about fit with the team? You need to be thoughtful about how you define that with everyone because, you know, there's kind of that classic example. And I've had several clients say, we just use, like, could I go for a beer with them as our metric? And I think that's a terrible metric because you're looking for someone who could be your friend to go for a drink. You're going to eliminate all kinds of wonderful people who don't fit into that classification. But you need to define, like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean the kind of person that I can talk authentically with. Okay, so that's different than going for a beer with someone. Like, so you want to be able to have genuine conversations. You want to be able to, you know, trust them. And so identifying kind of what's behind gut instinct so that you can really understand, like, you have to trust your gut, but you have to also know where that's coming from.
So there's a question that just came in, and I've got my glasses in, but I'm so old I'm not sure I can see the name. In any event, the theme of the question is around this whole issue around fit is how do you ensure, because we talked at the beginning about diversity, right? And diversity in the broadest sense, right? That we all look alike, male, female, ethnic, the whole, you know, there's lots of layers to that. How do you what's the balance, or how do you strike between saying fit, which can feel one way, and diversity? Because fit could easily lead to, well, we're not going to have anyone that looks much different than we are. And I guess that's, I mean, we can ask these questions in a number of different ways, but these are the struggles that I think a small business, particularly our members, they want to be diverse. They want to get the best person in a lot of cases. But how do we strike that fit versus diversity equation?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Christina.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think that it's comfort, right? So if fit means comfort, I'm going to hire people who are just like me, who aren't going to challenge me, who are going to be the same. Because I'm really comfortable with myself, and I'm comfortable with people who just think exactly like I do. And maybe those are the people that I'm going to say, yeah, like on an easy Friday night, that's who I want to go out and have a drink with. But I think looking at what does a culture add? So what does this person add to the team that isn't here already, as opposed to being the same? So when you define fit as exactly like the rest of us, you'll get exactly like the rest of you. But where fit is not like the rest of us, but similar in the ways that matter. So similar in terms of culture, similar in terms of they love what our business does. You know, they want to make the impact that our business adds, but maybe they come from a very different background and are going to challenge and maybe make me a little uncomfortable with some of their questions, or some of the ways that they lead, or you know, the things that they bring to the table. But to understand what's the difference between what makes me comfortable and what actually adds a lot of value.
So you've hired someone again, you know, finishing up on fit. I mean, I think Michael Snyder's had raised the question maybe before we went on air around open and honest coaching conversations, and both one-on-one and with the whole group about what expectations are. I think that's, and we're gonna get to that. I think maybe later in the month we're gonna drill down on that. But I don't know, maybe Michael, you just want to touch on that, because that's you know, that's you've hired, and now you're managing the person to make sure they become more part of that culture. Those conversations are difficult to have, but they're necessary.
And Olivia and Christina are absolutely correct. The first line of defense when it comes to fit is definitely how you recruit and how you engage talent at the front end. It's much easier to manage fit when you're bringing people that already fit. And when it comes to diversity, if you have a diverse, inclusive type of culture that you build, then the fit is fitting diversity within your organization. But if you hire somebody that you thought they had the fit through the hiring process, but you're finding that they're not fitting either to the cultural norms or the behavioral norms of the organization, or to what your expectations are, then it's really important that we as leaders and as business owners is to really focus on those short conversations where you help them to come back into the value system that you've established, or the cultural system that you've established. Having those 10 to 15 minute conversations is highly valuable. So even if they may not show that fit right away, you can help to elevate them towards that fit.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna leave that, and I want to move on to something which is, and I think this is no shock to anybody. We are already working remotely. It was all sprung upon us. I think I see all of us in either a basement or an apartment, but certainly not in an office setting on this call. And most of the people that will be on the webinar will be in the same boat. Remote work, I think, came upon us because of COVID, but it is not going away. And the real question is, when our office is not likely to open up for many more months yet, just for safety and for other reasons, but we're all working from home. So when we can safely reopen, how do you see remote work changing post-COVID? Because some will want to get back to the office, others will be quite comfortable working at home, or working more at home versus being in the office. That also has an impact on everything we've talked about so far: diversity, fit, collaboration, teamwork. Why don't you give us your sense of where that's at, where you think it's at right now, because it's likely to change, but it's an important one for folks that are struggling with at home, working at home, from a variety of different perspectives: productivity, mental health, you know, care for their own staff, service to clients. There's a lot of different strands to that. So I don't know who wants to take a first crack at that.
Yeah, Olivia, you want to go?
Okay. Yeah, I think remote work is a really interesting piece of, as you said, both attracting talent. How do you manage that over Zoom or over a webcam or whatever, but also maintaining your team? And I think a big part of it is that as the founder or leader of your team or company, you need to set the tone. You need to show up in a way, you know, Christina has done a really good job for our team of showing up being like, this is my house. Welcome. We all are in each other's houses now. Yeah. And I think it's also really important to acknowledge that while saying take care of yourself is one thing, pushing your employees to actually do it is another. On a sunny day, getting a message from Christina being like, make sure you get outside while it's sunny. You know, we have so few sunny hours during this day. If you're not leaving your house, it's really easy to go many days not leaving your house, not seeing the sun, not getting fresh air. So I think as a leader, it's really important to set that tone. And really, I walk the walk is, you know, the most blasé expression, but putting it out there and telling the team what you're doing too. Sort of showing up authentically and sharing like, you know, I'm doing this with my family this weekend. I know when COVID first started, Christina's family did a bunch of arts and crafts, and they were showing us a lot of the things they were doing. So I think there's that leadership element comes into play, especially when you're remote. I think what's going to be interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think what's going to be interesting is when we get a mix, when we are allowed to go back to offices and when we are allowed to also stay home. Because I think that flexibility has been established now for a lot of people that being in an office full time, it's going to be hard to explain why that's necessary anymore. And I think what's going to be important is keeping the same communication lines online so that people are still involved, whether they're in the office or at home or both, depending on the day. Whatever way you're using to communicate to your team now, keep that the same because that's the equalizer for everyone. And that also opens up a new talent pool too. If you before needed people to be in a region, to be in the office with you because you thought that that was going to help with establishing the culture, we had that option taken away from us. So we've all had to learn how to do that anyways. Keep that up because it's going to help you access people who are in different parts and who are going to help bring that diverse viewpoint. Someone in Toronto, someone in KW, someone in Hamilton, someone in Vancouver. All of those people are going to bring a slightly different view to what's going on, and that's going to help enhance your team as well.
And I think the other interesting thing is we're not just working remote, right? We're working remote with our kids at home in a pandemic. Like there's so many other stressors on top of working remote that hopefully when we're back in offices and the world has resumed some kind of normalcy, it'll just be working remote, right? So we'll get the benefit of it without kind of the right now the current downside of everybody's in the house without choice. So I think that as employers, it's important to know that we can't put the rabbit back in the hat. Like people have had the opportunity to work remote. They've been productive in a lot of cases. So to require them to be in the office might be trivial. So to understand sort of how do you then mandate that as a balance? And if you do mandate it and it's not really necessary, you're likely to limit the number of people that are interested in your job. But there are a lot of people that want to be around their teammates. So figuring out what that balance is, and I think to Olivia's point, to make sure that if not everybody is in the office, that you provide an opportunity for everyone to still feel like they belong, and to make sure that communication is with everybody. Because that's one thing that I think we were guilty of that I didn't realize as much until we were all at home, that our teammate that works from Toronto wasn't in the office, or someone that had meetings in the morning wasn't in the office, and we would share important information, just me saying it out loud, and not everybody would get it.
So that it kind of leads to the follow-on question. We're into this right now, and parts of this will probably, as you said, I'm sure will remain. But what are the skills we need now in this? Because it's, again, the better part of this year is still going to be like we are right now before we start to more fully open up. So what are the skills you need with remote management that weren't as important before? And I think you were just getting at that in terms of different kind of communication, right? Because there's the visual kind of walking past someone's office and sticking your head in as you're going out and having that 60-second kind of connection sometimes, which is what some of your staff, that's all they need is how you doing? What are you working on? Do you need a hand? Oh, and And that doesn't happen in the same way when everything is scheduled half an hour at a time with a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams or whatever people are using these days. What are those skills that in particular management or senior leaders need to have that weren't as important before?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Management by walking around doesn't work.
No.
Unless you're managing your plants and your pets. So being able to trust and to hire people that you can trust and to really manage based on objectives and results and to give people work to do that you don't need to watch them do. So, your micromanagers that I don't know anyone who actually self-identifies as a micromanager, but there's lots of people that that identify others as micromanagers. It can't work in this environment. So you have to get good at data. You have to get good at measuring things that you can't see. And you have to have a lot of intent around taking care of people that you can't see, because the quiet folks that are working really hard in the corner are now not even in the corner of your screen, right? So they're somewhere. So lots of check-ins. So I think as you look for leaders or look to, and I'm sure that Michael's going to jump on this and the session later in the month, but being purposeful and having a lot of intent around checking in on people, offering help, less from a place of I need to check to make sure you're working, and more from how can I help? Like, are you hitting any roadblocks? Like, the doors are still open, and being purposeful as well, just around social stuff. So how are you, and how was the move, and how is homeschooling going for your kids, so that those personal connections are there, because creating a sense of belonging in an office is easier when you bring in lunch or when you have cool workspaces that people can kind of hang out and you can, the teams all just go for lunch together. It's not happening anymore. So, so creating those opportunities has to happen with more intent.
Mind if I just step in real quick and add to, like, Christina, you can teach what we teach. Seriously, like you're bang on, but the difficulty is that because we are all working remotely, including us as leaders and business owners, we get so focused and so stuck into our day-to-day and into our tasks and everything else like that. And because we're not in the office walking past our team members and everything else like that, we don't have that tendency to reach out to them because we get so focused on just doing our own thing. So it's making that mental note to yourself, at least daily, to say, I'm going to reach out to at least 2 of my team members today and just say hi, how are things going and everything else. Don't have an agenda with it. But it's making that mental note to physically step out of your own kind of in your tasks and reach out to your people. Very important. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and we also have, something that's happened organically with our team that's great is and I see it because I can see everyone's calendar. I see coffee meetings, and when we used to be allowed to go for walks, people would go for walks together, but they just have a social. Like, we're just having a 15 or 30-minute like coffee break to connect. And, almost every other day I have lunch with one of my teammates. And they just come into they don't actually come into my kitchen, but my Zoom is open in my kitchen, and we, we'll heat up a bowl of soup and talk about stuff. And it's not just like, what are you working on? How's it going? What's happening in your evenings? How are the kids? It's, again, just to mimic the things that would have organically happened if we'd all been in the office.
Got time for 2. I got one question, but there's one that's come in the chat box, and it's a good one because I've just been through a hiring process, and I'm sure many people are doing this. Any tips for how to interview for fit and other soft skills when interviews are conducted over Zoom, which is, it's a lot harder to see body language and, a whole range of things. I think it's a good question. In fact, I would just say we had, from the time we started working at home last March, we hired co-op students that started in September and worked to December. Never met them once in person, never met them through the interview process, never, because we were all working at home. I actually saw one of them on their doorstep as I was dropping off a Christmas basket to all the staff, but it was the first time I'd physically seen them. Now, we were lucky. We had two amazing students, one from Laurier, one for Waterloo. And I take no credit for it because the rest of my staff did all the interviews, but it occurred to me, I guess in that moment, never met the person, and that's got to be a scary proposition for small business owners and organizational leaders to hire someone who they've never. There's a physicality to understanding people, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Lost. So maybe just take a crack at that, and then I'll finish with one last question.
Yeah, and it's super hard and daunting. And I would say we had a couple of searches at the beginning of the shutdown that stopped because we had leaders in those companies that say, I can't possibly hire a head of sales that I can't have a dinner with. Like, how would we possibly do that? And they've since figured it out. So I say, be intentional about starting the interview in the way that you would start if you were walking from the reception to the meeting room. So engage in some banter, break the ice, get to know the person. A simple question like, so tell me your story. Like, tell me who you are, let me know who you are, because I think the one thing that happens in video meetings is that we get right to the point, right? And I love when people are direct and have an agenda and we can get through content quickly, but that's really not a great way to conduct an interview because you don't get to know the person. You get these chunks of content, which is important, but not the whole story. So get them to tell you their story, ask questions about sort of how are they doing through this, and try to create some kind of personal connection so that you can get to know them. Ask questions like, what are the jobs that you love? Like, ask to speak to the things like, who are you and what do you really love to do? And, outside of work, what do you love to do? Because the interesting thing is, you hire a resume and then a person shows up. And so you kind of want to know, like, who's the person that's going to show up? Because, like, I'm probably never going to look at the resume again, right? And those are the skills that they're going to bring, but I want to know who that person is. So get them to tell you stories of what they've done and take your time with those calls and let them tell you what they need. Yeah. From the role as well, because I think that all of those things kind of paint a much broader picture.
Yeah, I think the other part that you highlighted, and it works for us in this case, is even if you're a small business, bring someone that you trust that's in your corner and have them at least listen into the conversation, because having someone else's sense or measure of a person is inevitably going to be different than yours. You may both say, yeah, great interview, but for different reasons. That's helpful, or really didn't like that, or boy, that rubbed me the wrong way. That, I think that's in the two-dimensional mechanism that we're on right now. That can be helpful as well, particularly for a small, medium-sized business. Take advantage of either your other team members or your advisors that work for you if you're very small. Okay, last questions, and we've covered a little bit about this diversity, but I think I want to drill down on this. It's increasingly important. We've talked about the tendencies to see or to gravitate to what we know. And so maybe just in wrapping up, because I think this is incredibly important, because maybe 5 years ago, diversity would have been how many women are working in your organization versus men. This is complex now when we talk about Indigenous, Black, people of color, disabled, or physically challenged. We got mental health. All of those things are incorporated in diversity and inclusion in terms of making sure that a workplace is open and taking advantage of the opportunities and the skills that everyone has. And I think one of the things that that's come out of this pandemic is there is no talent that can go to waste for business or in the economy. We have to take everyone, and they all may look different and have different challenges, but so it's less around the things we might know, but to really get at that, how do I look for the talent? and not screen myself out or my organization of great talent because I'm looking through perhaps an old lens. So it's maybe more specific, maybe expand on what you said earlier, because I think that is going to be a crucial thing, particularly for small and medium-sized business. Our friends at the Immigration Partnership are supporting this program, but I've been working with the partnership for 10 years because talent for Waterloo Region, all net new employment in Canada is coming from immigrants within 2 to 3, 4, 5 years maximum. We better get good and comfortable with saying we're going to have people in our workplace that don't look like us, or that come from a broad cross section of cultures. And I think that's something that's really important for business to understand in this context about hiring and having leadership and fit.
Yeah, and I think so. On that note, there's a bunch. I mean, we could take a whole other hour, but first, to kind of tie the two questions together, if you're interviewing someone over video, don't judge how they use the technology if that's not the job. Like if it's a technical job, maybe, but so if they have their camera angled and you're looking up their nose, or like, don't judge those things, because that's not what you're hiring for. So I would say suspend judgment on things that really don't matter. If they're using one of those wonky backgrounds and you think, well, like, why would you do that? It might be because they're in a busy place and it's messy behind them, and that's okay, because that's really not what you're hiring for. So I think, really know, what does this person need to do the job well, and question some of our, I started in recruiting long enough ago that there were some kinds of discrimination that were okay, and they weren't okay, but they were normalized. So how nice are your shoes, and does it match your belt? Like, it really doesn't matter. So there's a lot of things that I think we need to challenge. Can I take this person for a beer, or have a beer meeting as part of the interview process? That excludes huge demographics of people, right? So, if that's part of your culture, then it's not a question of do you fit, does your culture even fit anymore? Because it's a competitive environment. So I think companies are tuning into the fact that if you don't have diversity, it's not a checkbox. It's not so that you don't have like social media scorn. It's really so that you can be competitive in your environment. So if you can't effectively hire women, you're leaving a huge percentage of the population, and the companies that can effectively hire women are going to beat you. If you can't effectively hire, people that are new to the country and maybe have an accent, you're going to be at a disadvantage to the companies that understand that that is incredible talent. So I think seeing diversity as a competitive advantage really will challenge how companies look to hire purposefully, as opposed to just like making an exception reluctantly. So there's lots of things that I think, as you look through job descriptions, if you need a North American degree, you're excluding too much of the population.
Those are some good tips, but I think, and we will have you back on, because those are important discussions to have, because and ultimately part of the reason we're doing this business success series is particularly for small and medium-sized business. We'll have the 35 or 40 people that are watching today, but we want to be pushing these topics out to people that they can watch on their own time, on our website or through social media posts. These are important conversations for small business to have, because this is really geared towards them. If they want to grow and become that medium-sized business or scale, talent is the way to do that. Technology and talent, and mostly talent. And so these conversations around how to be more diverse and how to get them is ultimately about getting the best talent. So really appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much, both Olivia and Christina. We appreciate you coming on with us today. It's been a fantastic session. So just as we end, thanks once again to our title sponsor of the series, Manulife. Our platinum sponsor for the series is the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region. And to this month's presenting sponsor, our friend Michael Snyder and his team at Future Focus Incorporated. Again, to today's speakers, Olivia and Christina of Artemis Canada. And finally, to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do host a new Business Success Series session every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Join us next Wednesday to hear how students are helping businesses through COVID-19, and that's with our coordinator of the Access Student Talent Program that's hosted by our chamber. We hope to see you then. For full details and to register, please visit greaterkwchamber.com. And please do share this series with your friends and colleagues, and join us every Wednesday afternoon for another edition of the Greater KW Chamber's Business Success Series, brought to you by Manulife, the Immigration Partnership, and Future Focus. Because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thanks so much and have a great afternoon.